Welcome to HardScript.
Help me reach 5,000 subscribers. Support the video with a like and leave your thoughts in the comments. There are moments you don't forget, no matter how many years pass. For me, it wasn't some loud argument or dramatic fight. It was a single sentence, spoken across the kitchen table on a quiet evening. Rachel, my wife, looked me in the eye and said, "I regret every day with you." She didn't shout it. She didn't cry. She said it with the kind of calm that cuts deeper than anger ever could. For a second, I sat frozen, my hand resting on the edge of my coffee mug, my mind replaying the words over and over. "I regret every day with you." The room felt smaller, the silence pressing against my chest. But instead of answering with fury, I slipped the ring from my finger, held it for a moment, then tossed it onto the table between us. The sound of metal hitting would echo through the house. I looked at her, steady and unshaken, and said, "Then let this be the last one." Her face drained of color. She hadn't expected that. She thought I would argue, beg, try to prove her wrong. Instead, I ended it in a single line. She opened her mouth to speak, but nothing came out. For the first time in years, she was the one stunned into silence. I stood, walked away, and left her sitting there with the ring between us. No shouting, no slammed doors, just a decision already made. That was the difference between us. Her words were meant to wound. Mine were meant to close the chapter. The following days were filled with a tension she didn't know how to handle. She tried to act as if nothing had happened, setting plates at the table, making small talk, pretending the world hadn't shifted. But I moved differently. I spoke less, acted more. I gathered documents, checked accounts, and began laying the foundation for a life without her. She noticed the changes, but didn't dare ask. And then, a week later, the story took a turn I didn't see coming. Her friend, one of the same people she used to complain to about me, showed up at my office. She closed the door behind her, looked me straight in the eye, and told me something Rachel never thought would leave their circle. Something that made me realize her regret wasn't just words. It was a confession of something far worse. At that moment, the ring I'd tossed onto the table wasn't just a symbol of the end. It was proof that I had walked away before her secret had the chance to bury me alive. And that was only the beginning. When Rachel's friend Emily walked into my office, I didn't expect anything more than awkward sympathy. She had always been polite at gatherings, a quiet observer in the background of Rachel's louder friends. But that day, she carried a weight in her eyes, something sharp and deliberate. She closed the door behind her and sat across from me, leaning forward. Without hesitation, she said Rachel had been meeting someone for months. Not just coffee or casual lunches, real meetings, private dinners, late-night texts. Emily's voice didn't waver, but her eyes told me she hated being the messenger. I didn't flinch. I didn't ask for details or demand proof. Deep down, I already knew. The regret Rachel had hurled at me wasn't spontaneous. It was fueled by guilt, by the kind of double life that rots from the inside. Emily said she couldn't watch Rachel lie anymore, not after hearing what I'd said at dinner, not after seeing me toss the ring and walk away without a word. She told me Rachel was panicking, that she hadn't expected me to take her words seriously, that she thought I'd still cling to the marriage, still keep her secret buried. Emily looked at me for a long time before finally whispering, "You deserve to know." When she left, the silence of my office felt heavier than ever. I didn't feel rage. I didn't feel sorrow. What I felt was clarity. Every step I had taken since tossing the ring had been correct. Rachel's regret wasn't about me. It was about losing the safety net I provided. And now, she was going to face a reality where I wasn't there to catch her when she fell. That evening, I walked through the front door of our house as if nothing had changed. Rachel was at the counter, scrolling through her phone, pretending the world was fine. She looked up and forced a smile, but I didn't return it. I simply placed my briefcase down, poured a glass of water, and went upstairs. In the past, I might have confronted her, demanded explanations, shouted until I lost my voice. But this time, I chose silence. Silence would cut deeper than rage ever could. And as I began to shift my belongings quietly, piece by piece, I knew she would soon realize what Emily had already told me. The life she built on lies was collapsing, and I wasn't going to lift a finger to save it. This wasn't revenge. This was removal, and it had only just begun. The day after Emily's visit, I logged into our accounts before leaving for work. I didn't drain them all at once. That would have been dramatic, noisy, the kind of thing Rachel could twist into a scene. Instead, I moved with precision. I closed the joint credit card, shifted my savings into an account with my name alone, and reduced her access to almost nothing. By lunchtime, Rachel discovered it. She called me, her voice sharper than usual, accusing the bank of making a mistake. I listened, let her spill her panic into the phone, then calmly told her there was no mistake. I had closed the card. I ended the call before she could respond. When I came home that evening, she was waiting. Her tone was different, less arrogant, more desperate. She said she needed the card for groceries, gas, essentials. I walked past her, placed my keys on the counter, and replied, "You'll figure it out." No explanation. No apology. Just the truth. The silence after my words was heavier than any argument we'd ever had. She stood there, clutching her phone like it could somehow reopen the life she thought was untouchable. But she knew. Something had shifted, and it wasn't going back. Over the next few days, she tested me. She left little notes on the fridge, asking if I'd reconsider. She cooked dinner one night, a meal she hadn't bothered to make in years, as if that would erase the words she had thrown at me across the kitchen table. I ate quietly, thanked her, then went upstairs without another word. She sat there long after, staring at her untouched plate. The more silent I became, the louder her panic grew. She tried calling Emily, her sister, anyone who might tell her this was temporary. But nothing she heard could restore the access she had lost. Every card declined, every canceled subscription, every empty gas tank reminded her that the safety net was gone. She began hovering near me, asking if we could talk, if we could work things out. Her voice was smaller now, almost childlike. But I didn't give her the satisfaction of a debate. I let her sit in the discomfort of her own choices. For Rachel, regret had always been a word she used to hurt. Now, it was becoming her reality, and I wasn't going to stop it. This wasn't about punishing her. It was about removing her from my life, piece by piece, until there was nothing left of us. The financial silence was only the first cut. The second came quietly, with the sound of hangers sliding across a closet rod. One evening, after Rachel had gone upstairs early, I opened the master closet and removed half my clothes. I carried them down the hallway to the guest room. No explanations, no words, just the dull thud of drawers closing behind me. The next morning, she noticed. She walked into the guest room while I was folding shirts, her face pale. She asked if I was really moving out of our bedroom. I didn't look up. I simply placed the last shirt in the drawer, closed it, and said, "You'll see." Then I brushed past her, leaving her in the doorway. That night, when she tried to climb into the bed we had shared for years, she found it empty. She wandered the hall, stopped at the guest room door, and stood there silently. I didn't invite her in. I didn't even turn my head. The quiet separation of our lives had become physical, visible, and she hated it. Over the next week, the house divided itself without me saying a word. My toiletries disappeared from the master bathroom and reappeared in the smaller one down the hall. My shoes left the front closet and lined neatly by the guest room door. Even my toothbrush was gone from beside hers, replaced with a bare patch of counter she stared at every morning. She tried to fight against it. One evening, she dressed up, lit candles in the master bedroom, and waited for me. When I walked past, she whispered that we could reconnect, that we didn't have to be like this. I paused in the doorway, looked at her once, then turned and went back to the guest room. The sound of her blowing out the candles followed me down the hall. It wasn't cruelty. It was clarity. She had told me she regretted every day with me, and I was simply making sure she wouldn't have to regret another. The space between us grew wider with every drawer I filled, every door I closed. She still tried to act like it was temporary, asking if I'd be back in the master room soon, if I'd stop punishing her. But the truth was simple. I wasn't punishing her. I was removing her from the center of my life, one quiet action at a time. And soon, those actions would carry me beyond the walls of that house entirely. It started with a single box. Papers, a few books, a framed photo I wanted to keep, not of Rachel, but of my parents, long gone now. I carried it out to the car on a quiet Saturday morning. The air was sharp, still, the kind of morning where sound travels further. Rachel heard the trunk close from the kitchen window. At first, she didn't say anything. She just watched, her eyes following me as I walked back inside, empty-handed. But when the second box appeared, shirts folded, shoes stacked neatly, her mask cracked. She asked where I was taking them. I didn't answer. I just passed her in the hallway, box in hand, and placed it in the trunk beside the first. The house began to thin out, little by little. Shelves cleared, drawers emptied, corners stripped of things that had once marked my presence. I didn't rush. Each trip was deliberate, each removal another line cut between us. By the third day, Rachel broke. She stood at the front door, blocking my path as I carried another box. Her voice shook as she asked if I was leaving her. I looked at her, steady, calm, and said nothing. I shifted the box in my arms, stepped around her, and placed it in the trunk. When I turned back, she was still standing in the doorway, frozen. That night, she tried a different tactic. She made dinner, poured wine, and waited at the table. She said we could talk, that we could fix things, that she didn't mean what she had said. I sat down, ate in silence, then stood and carried my plate to the sink. I didn't look back. The truth was simple. Her regret had been the truest thing she had ever said to me. And now, I was making sure it was mutual. As the days passed, she started hovering near the garage, listening for the sound of the trunk. She asked if every box was the last, if I would stop. But I didn't stop. I just kept moving. For Rachel, every box was a warning. For me, every box was freedom. And when the trunk finally held more of my life than the house did, she knew. This wasn't punishment. This wasn't a game. This was the end she had spoken into existence, one box at a time. By the 7th week, Rachel's desperation was obvious. She hovered in the kitchen when I walked in, lingered outside the guest room door at night, waiting for me to acknowledge her. But I gave her nothing. No words, no comfort, no reassurance. That was when I cut the last ties. The car she drove wasn't hers. It was mine, bought in my name, fueled with my money. One morning, while she was asleep, I had it towed away. By the time she woke and went outside, the driveway was empty. She ran through the house, calling my name, panic dripping from every syllable. I walked past her with my coffee and said, "It's not yours anymore." Then I left. Later that day, she tried to order something online, probably to distract herself, maybe to feel normal again. But every card declined. Every account she once used without thinking was locked. When I came home, she was sitting at the table with her laptop open, her face pale. She asked what she was supposed to do now. I didn't answer. I carried my bag upstairs and closed the door. The walls of her world began to close in. No car, no access to money, no comfort in the house that was becoming emptier by the day. She started calling friends, trying to borrow, trying to explain. But the words caught in her throat. How could she tell them that the husband she mocked, the man she said she regretted, was the same man she now relied on for survival? At night, I heard her pacing the hall, whispering on the phone, maybe to Emily, maybe to someone else. The conversations always ended the same, silence, followed by muffled sobs. She tried pleading with me one more time. She stood at the bottom of the stairs, her voice trembling as she said she didn't mean it, that she loved me, that she couldn't live like this. I looked down at her, calm and cold, and said nothing. Then I turned, walked into the guest room, and shut the door. That silence crushed her more than anger ever could. For years, she thought regret was just a weapon she could use in a sentence. Now, regret was her entire life. And I hadn't raised my voice once. The silence inside the house had already split us in two, but I wanted more than separation. I wanted permanence. One morning, while Rachel was still asleep, I drove downtown and walked into an office with polished floors and glass walls. The paperwork had already been prepared. All it required was my signature. I signed without hesitation. Every letter of my name was another nail in the coffin of what we used to be. When I returned home, Rachel was at the kitchen table, her laptop open, bills scattered in front of her. She looked tired, fragile in a way I hadn't seen before. She asked if we could figure something out. I didn't answer. I left the folder on the counter, placed neatly where she couldn't miss it. Hours later, I heard her gasp. She had opened the folder and found the documents inside. Divorce papers, clean and final. Her voice cracked as she called out to me, asking if this was real, if I was serious. I walked down the stairs, met her eyes, and said only one word: yes. Then I turned and walked back upstairs. That night, she hovered outside the guest room again, but she didn't knock. She stood there for nearly 20 minutes, whispering apologies to the closed door. I didn't respond. The silence on my side was louder than her words. The following days were filled with new patterns. Rachel stopped trying to play the role of the wife. She didn't cook, didn't pretend. Instead, she sat in silence, staring at her phone, waiting for me to change my mind. But I didn't. The house itself felt like a mirror of her unraveling. The once busy kitchen was quiet, the living room bare, our bedroom hollow. The spaces she thought defined our marriage were empty now, just like the promises she had broken long before. One evening, she broke down completely. She grabbed the papers, shoved them at me, and begged me not to go through with it. Her hands shook so violently the pages crumpled. I looked at her, calm and steady, and said nothing. I just took the papers from her trembling hands, smoothed them out, and placed them back in the folder. For her, those documents were a death sentence. For me, they were freedom. And she knew, for the first time, that there would be no second chances. After the papers were signed, the house no longer felt like ours. It was mine, and I treated it that way. I started with the photos. Frames on the mantel, pictures lining the hallway. Every image that showed us together came down. I wrapped them carefully, not in anger but in finality, and packed them into boxes. Soon, the walls were bare. Rachel walked in as I slid the last frame into the cardboard. She froze, staring at the empty space where her smile once hung, and whispered, "It's like I don't exist here." I didn't answer. I taped the box shut and carried it out to the garage. Next came the shared belongings, the throw blankets she liked, the dishes she picked out, the decorations she insisted on. Piece by piece, I stripped them away until the house looked less like a home and more like a clean slate. She followed me from room to room, her voice trembling as she asked why I was doing this, if I was trying to erase her. I walked past her without a word. One afternoon, she tried to resist. She grabbed a stack of photos from the counter and clutched them to her chest, begging me to stop. I looked at her for a long moment, then reached into the drawer, pulled out the wedding band I had tossed weeks ago, and placed it on top of the stack in her arms. "Keep them," I said. Then I turned and left the room. Her sobs followed me down the hall. By the end of that week, the house was silent in a new way. No laughter, no arguments, no shared routines, just empty walls and the sound of her pacing floors that no longer felt like hers. She spent hours sitting in the master bedroom, staring at the stripped walls, as if trying to memorize a past that was already gone. For me, the emptiness wasn't painful. It was freedom. Every cleared shelf, every bare wall, was a reminder that I was almost done. For her, the emptiness was suffocating. She had built her comfort on the illusion of permanence, and now she was watching that illusion collapse around her. She thought regret was a sentence spoken once. But now regret was the echo in every room she walked through, a sound louder than anything I could have said. And I still hadn't raised my voice. By the 9th week, there was nothing left to strip from the house. The walls were bare, the closets empty, the kitchen silent. The space that once echoed with her demands and her laughter now sounded like a hollow shell. That's when I knew it was time for the final step. I packed quietly in the early morning. My suitcase had been sitting in the guest room for days, half filled, waiting for this moment. I folded the last shirt, zipped the bag, and set it by the door. The sound of the zipper carried through the house, pulling Rachel out of sleep. She appeared at the top of the stairs, her face pale, her hair tangled, her eyes wide with panic. She saw the suitcase and froze. Her voice cracked as she asked if I was really leaving. I looked up at her, calm and steady, and said, "Yes." Her body trembled. She ran down the stairs, blocking the door, tears streaming as she begged me not to do this. She said we could start over, that she didn't mean what she said, that regret wasn't what she felt anymore. I lifted the suitcase, stepped around her, and opened the door. Her sobs filled the hallway, but I didn't look back. The driveway was cold under my feet, the air sharp with the promise of change. I placed the suitcase in the trunk, slid into the driver's seat, and started the engine. From the rearview mirror, I saw her standing in the doorway, arms hanging limp at her sides, the house behind her looking as empty as she felt. I didn't wave. I didn't speak. I pulled out of the driveway and let the silence swallow everything she tried to shout after me. As the road stretched ahead, I felt something I hadn't in years: peace. Every mile between me and that house was a mile between me and her regret. She had said she regretted every day with me, And now she would have plenty of days without me to measure that regret against. For her, the empty house was a prison. For me, the open road was freedom. And the loudest part of it all wasn't her crying in the doorway. It was the silence I left behind, the silence that would echo through her life long after mine had moved on. I didn't need to slam the door. I didn't need to yell. My absence was louder than anything she could ever say. The final step wasn't the suitcase, or the driveway, or the silence of the house shrinking behind me. The final step was the choice not to return. I didn't circle back. I didn't call to check on her. I didn't answer when her number flashed across my phone in the nights that followed. Each call went to voicemail. Each text remained unread. The silence I had built in the house now stretched into the world beyond it. Rachel tried everything. She showed up at my office once, her eyes swollen from crying, her voice cracking as she said we could fix this. I didn't let her pass the lobby. She left a letter in my mailbox, pages of apologies, saying she regretted what she said, that she didn't mean it. I didn't open it. I burned it without reading a word. Her regret, once just a weapon she wielded casually, had turned into her reality. Every morning she woke in that empty house. Every night she sat alone at the table. She was living the consequence of the sentence she had chosen. She had said she regretted every day with me. And I had given her a gift, days without me, as many as she wanted. I built a new life in the silence she left behind. I moved into a place that was mine alone, where every wall, every corner carried no trace of her. I reconnected with people I had lost while trapped in her orbit, started routines that didn't involve her moods or her needs. The more distance I put between us, the clearer I became. And then, one evening, Emily called. She said Rachel was falling apart, that she was barely holding on. I listened quietly. When Emily asked if I was really never going back, I told her. She said she regretted every day with me. I'm just giving her what she wanted. Emily didn't respond. The silence on the line told me everything. For Rachel, the regret that once felt like power had become her prison. For me, it was liberation. I never slammed the door, never raised my voice, never begged her to see what she had. I simply walked away. And in doing so, I became untouchable to her anger, her guilt, her regret. The loudest goodbye is the one that needs no sound. And in the end, she was left with nothing but her own words echoing through the emptiness. I regret every day with you. And now, those words belong to her alone. What would you have done in my place? If the story hit you, leave a like. And don't forget to subscribe. It only gets stronger from here.